Okay. Hopefully the sound should be fixed, I think. Give it 30 seconds. Let's see. Yes? Okay, cool. Good. Sorry, guys. That time it's actually my fault. Every other time we've had a problem, it's been with the webinar software. That time's actually my fault. I had a weird setting on my computer. I changed it, but then once it was changed, I had to reload the webinar so it would like take the new setting. So this time it was actually my fault. My bad. But we are live now. Sorry about that. All right, guys. What would be your suggested approach here? That's cute. All right. So now that we're live, let's check in and oh, very nice. I like that. Like the props in the book. Cool. Okay, so guys, we have obviously the mission from this week, which is to specifically work on your escalation, right? Specifically working on either doing a physical escalation stack or working on verbally escalating from small talk to more and more intimate sort of forms of communication, more and more intimate topics and subjects. So if you guys have anything that came up during the mission, let me know that. Also, if you guys had any questions in terms of the mission or how to execute it, what to do, how to put it together, any of those kind of things, I'll absolutely be taking any of those questions as well. So that's what I'm looking for specifically. Whatever else you got, I will take as well, but obviously things directly related to the mission first. While I'm waiting, so type your questions in the chat. While I'm waiting for those, I'm going to look back at the pre-webinar and see if there were any really good questions that came in ahead of time so that I can see what we're looking at in terms of that. So 1 second there while I check, and then we will get to the live ones. But post your questions in the little box, and we'll go from there. Okay, we have survey results here. Okay. Yeah, okay, cool. We have a couple that are actually relevant here, so that's good. Actually, I'll go with this one. I find when escalating the pronoun, I can go from I to you quite easily, but I have trouble going from you to we, as well as making it sexual. Can you recommend any drills or exercises to help with this? So the biggest thing with that is not even a technical one, it's a decision one, right? And so I to you is pretty safe. You to we is not safe, because when you go you to we, now all of a sudden you're like admitting you like the girl, right? And that's always the like, oh my God, like you have a crush on me. Oh my God, there's actual intent. And so that's why the biggest reason people don't go from you to we is because of that sort of internal thing holding them back, that sort of fear of rejection, fear of making it man to woman, fear of taking a stand. So the biggest shift there is an internal one of just deciding to do it. However, if you need training wheels, what you might do is make yourself a list of good we statements. So for example, we're not going to get along, or it's similar, even though it doesn't have the word we in it. You and I are not going to get along, which is the same as we're not going to get along. You could do, wow, we're really good together, or wow, we are quite the piece of work, aren't we? Or this is kind of a you and me, because you and me is the same as we. So if you say you and I or something like that, it's the same as we. You could say like, you and I are going to stand over here and everybody's going to look at us and be like, damn, who are those two? And why is that guy so good looking? Right. So you can do it in like cocky or sarcastic kind of ways, as opposed to like these sincere, like heartfelt, like I love you from like Valentine's Day Cupid type of ways. So that's a good way to do it. Anytime you are having trouble with a negative, I gave the answer before the situation. Anytime you're having trouble with an escalation, it's a good idea to escalate in the negative. So for example, if you're having trouble with like, you can't get physical with a girl at all, sometimes you can escalate negative, I hate you. And like actually push her away a little bit while saying, I hate you. So you did physically escalate, but you escalated in a way that wasn't quite as intentful. Or, instead of saying we're so good together, be like, oh, we're going to be bad together. Right. So you can make the escalation in the negative, and it's a good way to do it more safely if you're emotionally frazzled about it. So 1, just man up and decide to do it. 2, come up with some canned lines or canned routines that you can use. And then 3, escalate in the negative instead of in the positive. Because then you're going to get, it's going to come a lot easier to you, and it's not going to seem as risky overall. Let's see what else we have from the pre-webinar here before I get to the live ones. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's it as far as on the on topic ones. All right, so let's talk about what you guys have live on the webinar. How do I talk about me in order to get a girl attracted so I can get to her? Is it in subcommunication or is it just being cockier? She accepts. Sorry, and she accepts the frame eventually. Tough mission. Never realized how many questions statements I ask and set when talking about her. Yeah, it is interesting. It is really interesting to start thinking about exactly how you are communicating, what you're putting across, when you are asking questions, that kind of stuff. As far as the me thing, the best way I know to talk about you is to not even like use the word me so much, but it's just to think about having opinions. Okay. I knew a guy once who his entire game, well, and he was actually a pretty decent game. He wasn't the best, but he had okay game. And all he did was express opinions. And so that was his whole thing was like, I'm going to walk up and express my opinions to this girl. And he had like, you know how like in normal game we like break rapport a little bit first, like tease a little bit first, and then build comfort later on. What he would do is he'd intentionally disagree with the girl a lot at the start, and then he'd start agreeing with the girl as the interaction went on. So it'd be disagree, and then agree, and that's how he went from value to comfort, kind of. But all he did was express opinions. I think a great way to speak in the me is to just say, "Oh, I can't believe you said that. Here's how it really is." Or, I don't know, in my opinion, da, 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 da. So have opinions, back your opinions, and make strong statements. Because that way you're leading, you're being polarizing, you're not talking about small talk, you're talking about things you're passionate about. And that's a great lead in to the you and we type of communications. So rather than think about specifically the word me so much, I would think about like having opinions, right? Having opinions, stating your opinions. I would think about sort of like projecting your viewpoints out into the world in as much of an unfiltered way as possible, in as strong a way as possible. And then from there, you can start to include her in the viewpoint, or you can start to tease her. Oh, you think that? Oh, da, 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 da. Or, oh, you think that? That's so cool. We'll get along. Right. So I just want I to you to we, very, very quickly there. But once you start expressing your opinions and having some of your personality in the conversation, it's a lot easier to have her personality relate to yours and to have you guys create something together. Whereas when you're talking about random things all over the place, there's not really anything to hook onto when you go to those deeper stages. Let's see. I find when I'm transitioning from you to we and bringing sex into the conversation, I tend to use a lot of the same canned lines over and over again. How can I come up with new content in real time so that it comes off more genuine? Well, first off, I do want to say, like, I know that canned lines and canned routines are like a bad word within the new like RSD culture and whatnot. There's nothing really wrong with canned lines and routines, per se. They're not like bad game, and they're not like, ineffective or anything like that. The times that canned stuff is bad is one of two. Is either when you're just using it blindly without any idea of the context, like you're using it in the wrong places for the wrong reasons, or when you yourself are bored with it. But if you're engaged by it, if you're like happy with it and okay with it, and you're using it in the right way, there's nothing really wrong with being canned per se. Especially if, again, there's some flexibility to it. I even think of like canned game and canned routines as like a decent training wheels when you're learning a format. So if you're learning that you need to inject this type of communication into the interaction, doing it with some canned routines to start with isn't bad. So where you're at in your learning curve, which is, I can do it, but it's a little bit canned, is it's not a bad place to be. If you wanted to kind of train yourself to do it uncanned, it's interesting because this stuff has to be spur of the moment. It has to come up like, it's not like you get to like take it back and be like, wait, can I go back 3 sentences ago and say this other thing I should have said instead? It's all real time. So it's not how many right answers you have, it's how many right answers you have at the moment you need them. So do be aware of that's another advantage of canned game, is that like it's there when you need it in the moment. What I would suggest actually is to practice out of field a little bit. So use what you know. If what you know is canned, go ahead and use it. But if you want to go uncanned, if you want to go more natural, if you want to become more fluid with this, which I think is a great objective, like long term, then I would say practice it out of the field. So instead of like think of like the canned phrase you're saying, and instead of that canned phrase, think of 3 other ones you could say instead of it. So for example, if it was let's say typical one, you and I are not going to get along. Okay, you and I are not going to get along. Fine. Other ones you could say instead of that are, wow, you and I are going to be a disaster. or you and I are interesting combination. Let's leave it at that. Right. So there's different things you could say there. And so essentially what you're doing here is you're kind of creating new canned stuff, but what you're doing essentially is you're creating such a variety of canned things that now obviously you're not using the same one over and over again. And more importantly, these are canned things you created yourself and you understand the format of it. And the more times you practice it out of field, the more likely you're going to be to do it in field. It's kind of like the like if you're playing a sport, like you're playing basketball and you learn like a new dribbling move. You're not going to use it the first game out because it's not natural to you yet. But if you keep practicing it and practice for like 5 minutes a day, every single day, eventually you will use it in a game because it'll be fluid and it'll come naturally. So practicing it out of field like that can work really, really well. The other thing that you could do if you want to like just jump in the cold water a little bit is go out do this once you're very comfortable with the escalation. So once you've learned to escalate with the canned stuff and you know the sequencing, you know when you need the right things, then you could go out for a day and just make yourself do nothing canned. So you say, I'm going to go out today. I'm not going to say anything I've said before. And that's going to apply to your we statements. It's also going to apply to other things you're doing. So it's a good challenge to give yourself. But I wouldn't give yourself that challenge until you've kind of learned the sequencing, because there's two parts to learning a new skill, right? There's learning, there's actually maybe three parts. There's learning the skill. There's learning when to use the skill and why to use the skill. And then there's improvising the skill on the spot, right? And so if you try and learn all three of those at once, you're going to make it really difficult. If you learn them one by one and just let yourself progress more naturally, you'll probably have a better overall result. So be a little patient with yourself and don't ask for perfection from yourself the first moment. Don't ask for expert level performance the first time you ever see some material. Be willing to just, fumble around with it, figure it out a little bit along the way. Let's see. Open a two-set with the wingman, was able to bring up you while talking to the girl, felt kind of clunky to bring up the we in the conversation, especially when her friend is right there. Okay, that's interesting. So what you're talking about in general is the idea that like escalating in front of the friends can be problematic, right? But I mentioned a couple ideas earlier on here that are actually pretty useful there. And you can use this, by the way, for physical escalation as well as for verbal escalation. But the big idea is escalating in the negative, right? Escalating in the negative. So instead of, oh, we love each other, you can be like, we're going to fight. And the friend's not going to have an objection to that one because it's not trying for intimacy and it's not trying to get closer, right? So bring it up in the negative like that first bridges the gap, and then you can like kind of win each other over and like each other later on. The other thing you can do in terms of escalating with the friend is incorporate the friend into the escalation. So instead of being like, oh, we love each other, be like, you know what? I don't know if we're going to work, but like, just, you guys are friends. Do you trust her? Right. So you can actually qualify her a little bit through the friend, bring it up and use the friend, like involve the friend in what's going on in a positive way. Now, if you have a wingman, this may not be ideal because you may not want to cross streams. You may not want to like engage your wingman's girl so much because that could like ruin his game. But that said, the flip side of that is if you have a wingman and she is engaged with your wingman, then you don't need to worry so much about the friend being there. So you need to make that distinction. Either she's an important part of the interaction because she's not being engaged by your wingman, in which case, by all means, include her and run the set as though you don't have a wingman for a little bit, or your wingman's taking care of it, in which case you just need to like be cool with it and just be like, you know what, she's taking care of for now, so I'm just going to run my set the proper way. So make that distinction of how big of a factor the other girl is at this moment, and then make the appropriate adjustment. But know that A, you can escalate in the negative with verbal or physical escalation, and B, you can include the friend or include the other girl in what's going on so that it's much more natural. Let's see. What's the best way to sexualize a conversation when she's not giving you anything to misinterpret sexually? I love this question because guys ask me this all the time. They're like, well, I was in a conversation, it just didn't go anywhere. There's just no opportunity to sexualize it. Sure there was. Every single moment is an opportunity to sexualize it if you decide to, right? You can just decide at any moment to show intent. Be like, I'm sorry, I was distracted by how cute you were. Go back to what you were saying. That's not a misinterpretation. You don't need that. Or if you learn to do push-pull, if you learn to be, you know what, I love you, but I'm not so sure. You don't need a misinterpretation for that. So what you're really speaking to here when you're like saying, I couldn't sexualize it because I couldn't misinterpret anything, you're basically saying, I have one tool for sexualizing it. And when I don't see an opportunity to use that one tool, I'm useless. It's like a carpenter. If you knew how to use a hammer and that's the only tool you need, you'd be like, oh, wait, well, there's a hammer and nails. I can do a job right now. But then you see a screwdriver, you're like, oh, fuck, now what? Right? So learn the other tools, right? Instead of relying on, I have to misinterpret to make it sexual. There are a lot of other ways. There's just a statement of intent. There's a push-pull. There is a disqualifier that has a little sexual in it, right? There's all kinds of different ways to sexualize a conversation. There's telling a story about a friend of yours doing something sexual that's not related to you, but brings sex up as a topic. So there's tons and tons of ways to sexualize. If you only know one way to sexualize, yes, there'll be times when that's difficult. If you know 20 ways to sexualize, you're always going to have this arsenal, right? And so that's kind of the beauty of technical game. That's the beauty of skills, is that you don't run into this, oh shit, the opportunity didn't come up. No, because you created the opportunity. And because you, again, if you know all the different tools, if you only see, it's like, imagine if you're like a wrestler or a boxer or whatever, and you only know one fighting move, one combination, you're going to be looking and looking and looking. You'll be like, oh, my opponent never gave me a chance for that combination. If you know 20 different combinations, no matter what your opponent does, you have something, right? So try and get to that level. The other thing too, though, most likely when guys tell me this, it's not because they don't have enough technique. Like, enough technique helps, but mainly when guys say the opportunity didn't come up, it's because they weren't trying hard enough, or because they were hesitant, because they were like, oh, well, a perfect opportunity didn't come up. Maybe not, but a pretty good one probably did, right? And you don't need like a perfect 10 out of 10 situation for you to do something. Take the 7 out of 10 situation and work with it. Okay, so it's two different things. One, lower your standards for how good the situation has to be for you to misinterpret and make it sexual. Two, learn other tools and other varieties of sexualizing so that you're not reliant on exactly one. Let's see. All right, this one, the Victor, the couldn't pull thing, I'm going to ignore that right now because it's kind of off topic. Sorry, it's an interesting question and stuff, but it's kind of off topic. I'm going to encourage you guys. I'm actually going to log in real fast just to check and see what the signups are on this right now. I want to check. I want to remind you guys, we do have the Facebook group that you guys should definitely get on. Good to see a lot of you guys are on there now. Last time I checked, it was like 20 or 30 members. Now it's 120. If you guys have off-topic questions, go over and post them on the Facebook group. I'll actually log on to the Facebook group later tonight and answer questions over there. I wasn't aware that so many people had signed up yet, so I'll hop over there later on. But anything that's off topic like this, like I was having trouble pulling, but the logistics weren't good, it's a great question. It's just not a great question for this webinar because I want to keep things on topic. So anything that fits in that category of good question but not on topic, post those over on the Facebook group, and me and my staff and whatnot will get over on there. And especially now that we have a bunch of people on there, I'll definitely be over there later on this evening and tomorrow answering questions. Here's another one. I just mute next. Sorry about this. I don't answer questions about other instructors because I don't know. I honestly don't know. If you want to know what another instructor teaches, ask that instructor what they teach. I don't speak for their philosophy, so sorry about that. Okay, let's see. Hard time. Had a hard time with day game escalation versus night. Are they both the same? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, are they both the same? Yeah, day game much more verbal, night game much more physical, right? So the we sexualizing matters much more in the daytime. Getting physical matters much more in the night. Like in night game, a lot of times within 5-10 seconds of the interaction, I'd be like hugging a girl. Even like I've done times in nighttime where I like open with a kiss. I don't think I've ever opened a girl by kissing her in day game. It just, it's not a thing, right? But you can open and be like flirty in other ways. You can tease. You can like do push pull. You can use sexual entendre. You can misinterpret. All those things work really, really well in day game. The other thing that works really well in day game as an escalation is you meet somewhere and you very quickly venue change, like the quick venue change. The guys who I know who really crush it in day game are the guys who do instant dates within like 2 minutes of meeting a girl. So within like 2-3 minutes, they're off for coffee or off for a drink with a girl, right? And that's another form of escalation. So just the types of escalations you're going to do are different in daytime. But other than that, not really that different structurally. It's just different tools within the overall structure. How to start mentioning we? Well, I would say the biggest thing would be just do it. If you're like, look, it's pretty intimate. You could actually just start a sentence and be like, we, and then like trust your brain to finish it. There's a great technique. You guys have access to opening mastery, right? One of the big things I teach in opening mastery is the gun to the head technique, right? And the gun to the head technique basically says you start off with a format I love, and then everybody looks at you and you're like, oh shit, I better finish the sentence. Because before you started the sentence, the easiest thing to do was shut up, right? Before you start the sentence, your brain's like, how do I not make an ass of myself? Don't say anything. And then you go, I absolutely love, and then everybody's looking at you like, well, I better finish the sentence because otherwise I'll look like an idiot. Same kind of thing. If you don't know how to introduce we, but you kind of know it's the right time, you go, I've been thinking we, and then your brain's going to finish, should really get to know each other better because the fact of the matter is I don't know you well enough to like you yet, right? You can just make it up. Or, we should probably sit over here because there's too many people walking over here. Come with me, right? As soon as you say that, as soon as you say, I think we are, or you and I are an interesting idea because, I don't think we're going to get along, right? There's all these different things you can do. Just say you and I, or say we, and then trust yourself. Don't try and be perfect. Don't try and have don't try and plan a whole conversation out. Don't even try and plan out a few sentences. If you know that something needs to happen next, just do it. And then trust your brain to figure it out. Your brain is much smarter, more adaptable than you possibly know. Your brain has, decades of experience of social interaction. It will figure a solution out if you give it a chance. But if you hesitate and hold back and just let it be silent, it's going to take the safe route of shutting up, right? So the best way to start mentioning we is just to do it and figure it out after the fact. People who worry too much about getting it right the first time in game end up not ever making a try, and then they end up never getting it right because you can't plan it ahead. You just cannot plan ahead in game in a predictable way, because as soon as you say something and are planning on her having a response, 95% of the time her response is going to be different than what you expected, at least in some way, right? So as long as you're trying to plan ahead, you're kind of in paralysis and you're too slow and you're behind, right? You're not in the moment, and everything you're going to do the timing is going to be off, which is almost worse than not doing anything. So the best way to start mentioning it is just start mentioning it. If you know you need to start mentioning we, just start a sentence, get to the word we, and then your brain's going to be like, oh, fuck, I better finish the sentence, and that would be just fine. I love that idea, the concept of the gun to the head principle in all areas of game. Massively, massively useful. In fact, even in pulling, right? Gun to the head principle, which is you just like get to the next step, even if you don't know how to get it further, and your brain, once you get there, will figure something out most of the time, right? So the best way to do it is just to do it and not worry about it being perfect, and then let your brain figure it out after the fact. Let's see. Girls in general were receptive to you, but weren't receptive to we. It felt clunky and awkward. What small ways to use we in escalation? Examples you mentioned are too uncalibrated for my game level. It's just a matter of being more playful and saying it. Okay, being more playful works. Saying it in the negative works. Also, it's quite possible that you are bringing it up too early, right? So if you walk straight up to a girl and like within like a minute, you're like, oh, we're going to be great together. She's like, what the fuck? What is this we thing, right? And so if you're getting a bad response on we, it could be that it's uncalibrated. It could be that you're saying it in clunky, awkward ways. It could be that you need to say it in the negative, say it in a more teasing, more flirty way, a more fun way. Or it could be that you're just bringing it up too early. Without seeing your game, I don't know which of these is the case, but that's kind of the range of possibilities. So it's one of those things. One of those things is what's going wrong. So looking back at your own approaches, think to yourself which one you think it most likely is, and try and adjust that variable. And it may take a little messing around with. You may not get it perfect today, but let's say that there's 4 variables. Let's say after 4 nights you get it down. Now you can make any interaction intimate. So yeah, it's a few nights of practice, but it's well worth it. Right? The rewards will definitely justify the effort. And like I said, I don't really know what your particular issue is. The go-to for me would be maybe taking a little more time, like being a little more patient with it. And the other go-to would be phrasing it in the negative. Instead of saying we are, maybe say we're not, as the way that you bring up we first. Or like insert an ironic way, oh, what are we going to do with you? Right? Something like that, where it's not necessarily this like intimate, big, like I've put my heart out there and taken a big risk kind of thing. You've just kind of bridged the gap in an easier way. So I think those are pretty generally good ideas on it. Is it bad to be touchy? It depends. In general, if you're learning game, and especially if you're nervous about being physical, erring on the side of being a little too touchy is fine. Like, think of it this way. If you talk to like 3 girls, if 1 out of every 3 girls was like, ooh, you're a bit touchy, but the other 2 were okay with you escalating, and you're escalating a lot, you're going to get really far with those other 2. Whereas if instead you're just not escalating because you're afraid of being touchy, you're not going to have any girls say you're touchy and blow you out, but you're going to have the other 2 girls that you didn't talk to, like, not go anywhere and not escalate. So I'd much rather escalate effectively 2 out of 3 times and get a markedly bad response on time number 3 than have 3 kind of platonic situations that don't go anywhere. So if in doubt, I'd err on the side of overdoing it rather than underdoing it when you're learning. Does that make sense? Also understand that it's not about how many times you get not rejected. It's about how many times you get it to go to sex. So with that said, you need to take risks and you need to play to win as opposed to not lose. So is it bad to be touchy? Yes, literally, yes, it is. But the behaviors that are going to lead to you being called out as being touchy every once in a while are the same behaviors that are going to lead to you actually getting success a vast majority of the times. Okay. So I wouldn't be worried about being called touchy. Let's see. I usually escalate super fast when first meeting the girl and it's accepted or returned. And then, hang on. And then later the same night, she acts like she hates me. What the fuck? I don't know. There's obviously something else going on there, right? There are certain times when I get a question and I'm like, well, you're obviously not telling me the whole story. There's obviously something else that happened there, right? So what I would do is, because I can't give you an answer to that. She likes you and then this girl liked me and then she hated me. What happened, Todd? I don't know. But what I would ask you is, what other details can you fill into that question that if you were me, you might consider relevant in answering it? Was there a situation where you lost her attention for a bit? Was there a situation where you pushed too hard for a bit? Was there a situation where her friends came in and the situation changed? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So ask yourself what else happens, because generally if you're looking at a situation and you're like, I don't have enough information to solve this, one thing you can do is try and like twist the information you have in new ways. But the easier way is seek more information, right? In this case, it sounds like you just have not provided enough information to me, which means you probably are not providing enough information to yourself. And I bet that if you provide enough information to yourself, you may not even need me to answer, right? That's the funny thing, right? But a lot of times, like people that they think that I can just like do miracles, that like you just give me like, yeah, I talked to this girl. What's the answer? I'm like, whoa, hang on. There's not enough information, right? You have to give me enough information to work with. But the funny thing is, once you figure it out, what all the necessary information is, a lot of times you can figure it out yourself, right? So when you're confused and when you don't have answers, yes, definitely ask an authority. But even before you ask an authority, ask yourself, am I thinking this through all the way? Am I providing all the necessary details to myself and to my own brain? Because in this case, I don't think you are. What is the meaning of willingness to miscalibrate, and how come Ryan was not conscious of red flags? I don't know about this how come Ryan was not conscious of red flags thing. I don't know what that's all about. You'd have to explain to me what you mean by that. Meaning of willingness to Mutant X, ask that in more detail. Because again, this is another question about another instructor's game. In this case, I'm more willing to answer it because Ryan, in a sense, A, he can't answer for himself, and B, he was a bit of a mentor of mine in some areas of game. I assume you mean Ryan, the former RSD instructor, Ryan, by the way. But be more, I think I know what you're asking, but be more clear so I actually know what you're asking. I think what you're saying is his whole philosophy that like he wanted to hear no so much that no lost meaning, as opposed to my philosophy where it's like I don't want to hear no at all, and how to sort of reconcile those two. In which case, that's a pretty decent question. But just let me know if that's what you're actually asking or if it's something completely different. And maybe I'll answer this one further on in the webinar. Also, by the way, I will answer that one because it's interesting to me. Quite frankly, that's the main reason. And also because, again, Ryan's not someone you could ask a question to. But if you ever come to me with a question like, why does Julian say this? I don't know. Ask Julian. Why did Owen say this? Ask Owen. And especially, don't ask me to justify somebody else's like version of game, especially when it contradicts mine. You can ask why I do it my way, but asking me to justify something that I disagree with, there's a disconnect there. So I can't do that, like, quite frankly. But that one I will take because it is interesting. And like I said, because Ryan's not someone you could actually ask the question to. Let's see. How do I learn lost? Okay. Difficult getting to we because of value issues. Can you go in depth about talking fast for values? You mentioned the first infield. I feel like I might have to speed up my talking, opening, maybe not conveying personality quick enough. So the idea of when to talk fast is if you view that she's about to reject something, sometimes you can talk over that. Or if you're trying to introduce a lot of controversial things into the conversation at once, you can talk fast to introduce that. There's a disconnect between what you're saying, though. So you said difficulty getting to we because of value issues, and then you talk about the talking fast thing. The talking fast thing won't clear up value issues, okay? What talking fast will do, or what I call it the monologuing idea of like putting so much stuff in at once that she can't object to all of it. What that will do basically is if she already does like you, and if she already would be okay with the escalation, it allows her to sort of bypass her logical filter and allows you to bypass her logical filter and for her to just do what she really wants to do anyway. However, it's not going to solve issues of she thinks you're low value, and it's not going to solve issues of she doesn't like you enough or whatever, or she's uncomfortable escalating like on an emotional level, okay? So it helps handle a lot of the logical stuff. It's not a substitute for good vibe, good emotions, having her buy in, that kind of stuff. If you're having trouble with we because of value issues, I either like what is this we thing, or if they're like looking at you weird when you say the word we, that kind of stuff, it means probably either that you need to do it later in the conversation, you're trying to push into the conversation too early, or it could mean that you need to have more negative polarity and negative spikes beforehand in your conversation, so that there's more of a flirty nature and more of a desire on their part for a we to occur. Because if you're really positive and validating them and making them feel great about themselves the whole time and making them feel higher value than you, if they're higher value than you, you adopting the term we is not a win for them, it's a loss. If you're higher value than them, adopting the term we is a win for them rather than a loss. You understand? So you want to be the guy that joining your team would be an increase in her value. So if you have value issues, that should be solved in a value way rather than in like a sneaky technical way. So there's a little bit of a disconnect between what you're talking about here. So yeah, I kind of mentioned when you would want to use that idea of like saying so many things at once, or I call it like monologuing. And there's a time and a place for that. But it's not when there's a lack of value. The time and the place for that is when the value is there and the vibe is there, but you want to specifically avoid or mitigate red flags. Like you'd like to say some things that you really shouldn't be able to get away with saying. That's when you're going to use that. You don't use it just to like, it's not a value tool. It's sort of a technical tool, or it's an avoiding red flags sort of logical tool. If that kind of makes sense. So there's a disconnect in your question. So the two things you're saying don't make sense juxtaposed with each other. How to learn that lost art of game that Ryan put out. We have a Ryan fan. That's good. Let's see. Interested in simply talking. I don't feel comfortable escalating. Jay, I don't know what's up with your. So you wrote something. You wrote it twice. Okay. So in conversation, I'm trying to verbally escalate. If the girl doesn't look interested or is simply talking, I don't feel comfortable escalating. No. So here's the issue, right? So there's two things. There's two very, very distinct things here, right? So this guy said, the girl just, she's just talking. I don't feel comfortable escalating. Is there something wrong with my hook? No. If you tried to escalate and she objected to the escalation, there might be something wrong with the set or wrong with the hook. If you just don't feel comfortable, all that proves is that you don't feel comfortable. It doesn't prove that there's anything actually wrong, okay? So many guys are doing fine in an interaction. The conversation's fine, it's going well. They don't feel comfortable escalating, so they don't escalate, and then it doesn't go anywhere. Now, if you actually are escalating getting a rejection, that's actual information about how things are going. If you just don't escalate because you feel uncomfortable, that's not real information. That's your mind getting in its own way, okay? That's you holding back out of fear instead of taking right action. So no, that doesn't prove anything, right? You need to actually test things in the real world, because your feelings don't tell you anything about the real world. They tell you about your interpretation of the real world. Do you understand that distinction, right? So yeah, so if your interpretation is that it's not going well, maybe it's valid, maybe it's not valid, but until you test it in the real world, you don't actually know. If you test in the real world and you get that response, and you hone your feelings over time based on real world data, then maybe your feelings start to mean something. But really the only reason they mean anything even then is because of this relation to the real world, right? So if you don't feel comfortable escalating, that tells you nothing about the set. Especially if you're learning to escalate and you're not very comfortable with it in general. If you escalate and have things go wrong, that tells you something about the interaction, which is why it's so important to try this even if you fail. If you try this and fail, that's a success, because it's a successful learning experience. If you sit there and don't try it, and then you don't have a failure, but you don't learn anything and nothing new happened, that's a failure because it's a waste of time. Let's see. Logical escalation. I live 6 seconds away from the clubs. That's nice. Good for you. Really on the street of the clubs. Is there a cheat in such a logistical? Oh, sorry. I read logical is logistical. Is there a cheat in such a logistical situation? That is off topic. However, the cheat would be, I know a place down the street where we can grab a drink, right? Especially if it's a row of clubs, or another place down the street where we can grab a drink. There's a lot of ways to phrase it. As though you're going to another club when you're actually going home. And then if they like you enough, they'll just be fine with it. So that's a pretty good way to go. And the other cheat there is just to like, hey, let's bounce for a second. We'll be right back. We're going literally like 2 doors down, right? So that way they don't worry about the friends. So those are 2 cheats. One is to get away from the friends. The other is just to like get their kind of feet moving. Anyway, let's see. The conversation, I'm trying to... Okay, I asked that one. I answered that one already. If you walk up into a crowd, make eye contact, you're going to approach, then choke, just stand there for too long. Is it better just go for it anyway? Nikos, that's off topic. Look at opening mastery, actually, for the answer to that, though. And also, you can post that one on Facebook, but it's off topic for this webinar. I kill it in the first 60 seconds, make out numbers. If I see her later, she's lost everything. She usually doesn't accept my advances at all. My guess there... So here's my question. So Kevin, you're still missing something. You're closer though. You're closer this time, right? This is the same guy before that I'm like, you're not giving me enough information. You're still not, but you're closer. There's one more piece missing. Okay, so you kill it in the first 60 seconds, make outs, numbers, even pulls. But if you see her later, the set has lost everything. She usually doesn't accept your advances at all. Now there's a big disconnect, right? So you have this great set early on, and then you have them not responding to you later on. The question is, what happened in the middle? Because something happened in the middle. If it was this good, it should have gone somewhere, right? The fact that it didn't go somewhere means something happened, right? And that's the answer to your question. Whatever's happening in that middle chunk is the answer to your question. So it could be that you're pushing too far because you're like encouraging things are going well, you're pushing too far, and then it's messing it up. It could be that you get interrupted, and then when you go back in, you're trying to pick it up right where you left off, and that's a problem, right? Or it could be that you got interrupted, and then because you'd gotten close to sex or it was really good, they started to feel slutty about it, and they had buyer's remorse. There's a lot of different things that could happen. But still, the piece that's missing in answering the question is that middle piece. Because you have the start where it's going well, the end where it's not going well. There's something that happens because otherwise the start would have gone to going well without there having to be a reopen. So the question you have to ask yourself is what happened in the middle? Because the answer you're looking for is something that happened in that middle chunk. Okay, let's see. Love the mission. Really need to work on seating the pull and leading. Hope this comes up soon. We will talk about leading. We will definitely do leading and seating going forward. That'll be towards the end. We're only on, I think that was week 3, so we have 5 more weeks. We'll get there. I do promise we'll get towards seating and leading. Oh man. I'm going to answer this just one just because it's like, this is Mutant X. This is, first of all, this is the last question of yours I'm going to ask that's not on topic, like super on topic, because you're asking so many questions. But I will answer this one because it's clearly an emotional one. It's clearly an important one. How to escalate properly on day 2. Should I talk about my life, which is full of DLV stories? Why? Why would your life be full of DLV stories? That's just silly. Like, why would you have that perception of yourself? Okay. Your life stories are good and interesting. I promise you. Even if you had the lamest life ever, if you talk about the important moments in your life, the places where you learned something, the places that were emotional, all of those stories will be good stories. So don't get this idea that like your life sucks and your stories suck, right? If you go in with that idea, yeah, you're going to be, if your frame is bad enough, no amount of pickup technique is going to help you, okay? If your frame is good enough, almost no lack of technique can hurt you, because the biggest thing that's going on in pickup is you're telling a story to the girl. You're conveying who you are to the girl, and you're essentially conveying your frame to the girl. So yes, if your frame is that you suck and you're boring, then yes, you're going to have a lot of problems. So should you get patterns or stories from speed seduction? No. You should get patterns and stories from your own life, and you should trust them and believe them. Okay? Because the fact that you're asking it that way, it means that that's the fundamental thing you need to do. All right? I promise you, your stories are good enough. I promise you, you've had enough interesting things happen in your life that you have good stories to tell. In fact, the worse your life is, in a way, the more stories and more interesting shit you have to tell, and more things you can talk about overcoming, the more things you can talk about that are very human. You have a lot to work with. Learn to use what your own thing is. So if you want stories and routines, take stories and routines from your own life. Sit down and write down the stories from your own life. And they don't have to make it seem like you're winning at life and have 20 limos or anything like that. But they do have to show your character and where your values came from. All right. So write out 5 stories that are, and they don't have to be long, just bullet points is fine. 5 stories that convey where your values came from, where your opinions came from, and then trust that your opinions are good and go talk about those. All right. That's what I want you to do personally in terms of your content and how you present yourself. Okay, Mark. I see some of your infield opens. Escalation-wise, you're going right up to you in a very direct manner. How do you know when it's right to calibrate? Like the second you see a response? My brain doesn't work that quickly, I feel. Okay. So yeah, a lot of my opens, it does look like I go straight to you. What's actually happening really is it's 2 things. Number 1, what I'm really opening with most of the time isn't you. I'm opening with hi. Okay? And when I open with hi, one of 2 things happens. Either I get a warm response or a cold response. When I get a warm response, oftentimes I skip the I and I go straight to you, right? Or something you-ish. And what I'm really doing is like a lot of times I make a cold read. And a cold read's a little bit of both because it's my opinion of you is, right? So it's a little bit of an I and a little bit of a you. So it's kind of an in-between. But I'm going in and I'm saying that thing when there's a warm response, when there's a good response. When there's a bad response, I'm not saying either I or you. What I'm actually doing is I'm dealing with the shit test implied by the bad response, right? So I go, hey, what's up? And then she gives me like this icy cold look. I'm like, whoa, that was a hilarious look. Anyway, hi, I'm Todd. Nice to meet you, right? And so I'm actually dealing with the shit test, or I'm dealing with what she gives me, right? And so because I'm pretty assertive, I usually get either a positive response or a negative response. When I get the negative response, I pass the shit test. When I get the positive response, a lot of times I don't have to waste a lot of time with small talk. I can get straight to it because the initial response is very good. And that has to do with good tone of voice, good body language, good approach angle, those kind of things. And then it's not like I get a good response every time, but when I get the negative response, I'm aware of it and I'm quickly calibrated. But it's a good experiment. You can try an experiment with just going straight to you on any decent approach. Like if a girl's like, just like fuck off, don't go to you on that. But if the girl's receptive, skip to you. Because the other good thing about skipping to you is that she'll either accept it or she'll give you a shit test. So along the lines of, if you look in opening mastery, focus, arrogance, maintain, escalate, going straight to you is a very minor form of arrogance, right? It's a very minor form of arrogance because you're assuming as a stranger that you have the right to judge her. You're assuming as a stranger that you have the right to talk about her instead of just talking about yourself or talking about mundane topics. You're taking a little risk. You're being a little assertive. And that's not only fine, but also effective as far as it goes. So yeah, I do skip over the I part a lot because I'm just very comfortable with the you stuff and I'm very comfortable with everything that comes out of it. The reason that I mention I, you, we, because most guys are uncomfortable doing you at all. And so a lot of guys want to get started in the conversation in a more platonic way because they're afraid to do it otherwise, or that's what they're used to doing. If you're confident and comfortable going straight to you, there's not a real big reason why you can't. You will take a few more rejections, but also the sets that don't reject you will go a little bit better, right? And if you're calibrated about it, why not? Okay, had a problem escalating. Whoa, we got a lot of questions. That's awesome. Let me go back to where we were. Had a problem escalating verbally on a girl with poor English. It frustrated me a bit. I cannot escalate physically unless I get a green light via verbal escalation first. Is that a limiting belief? It is a limiting belief. It depends on the context, though. There are times when physical definitely should go after verbal. In general, if a girl doesn't speak very good English, I just simplify and I get a lot sweeter. And I basically say to myself that a lot of the value is coming from the fact that I speak English better than her, and a lot of my like like relative to her, if we're speaking English and I speak really well and she speaks really poorly, she's already feeling probably self-conscious, insecure, lower value. So there's probably less I need to do value-wise. And so I actually will be sweeter, more complimentary. I'll use smaller, easier words. I won't use like a lot of big words that are like maybe confusing to her. So there's a lot of adjustments like that I'm making in order for things to go better. So yeah, that's a little bit of the general idea of what I'm doing there. Let's see. One thing I have to warn you guys, hopefully we won't have a problem. If the battery gets much lower, I might plug in, but we'll see. I should be okay to the end of the webinar. We'll see though. Let's see how to pull in day game without going an instant date. What makes it possible? Off topic. Sorry. Not really related to the mission. Okay, so could I use your bathroom? TNS had her place. All went well. Give it a try. Would recommend it anyways. Also off topic. I promise you guys with the missions, we are going to get to some venue changing and polling missions. So I will answer those questions when that time comes. But yeah, for this particular one, it's off topic. Also, you can post it on Facebook if you want a sooner answer. Let's see. The game at times feels overwhelming. Some of my friends' behaviors. Slow down. Okay. 2, 3. Okay. Kill the first 60 seconds. Okay. I asked that one already. Okay, cool. I'll check. Victor, I'll check on that. Relationship roadmap number 3. It should be uploaded, but I'll make sure that gets up after the thing. Got it. How does building comfort first and then attraction work? It doesn't usually in cold approach. That works in social circles. By the way, guys, I'm going to say this, like, if somebody's posting 50 questions on here, I'm sorry, I'm just not going to answer all 50 of your questions. I just can't, especially if they're off topic. So I'm going to stick to on topic questions. I don't mean to say it to be a dick to anybody. It's just like, sincerely, like, there's a lot of people on here, and if everybody posted every question they have, we'd never finish. So on topic questions, and if you post like more than like 5 questions and I notice it, I'm just going to start skipping over your name at some point. So and like post the question you care about. Post the question that's related to the mission, the question that's most important to you. Don't just like spitfire like 20 different questions, because then, what's the point? I've been flaked on by girls after the number closed, or a few minutes after the number. I talked too much. It's best number closings. It can cost too much agenda. Like, why is he still there? Okay, off topic. I'll get to some of these off topic questions, by the way. I second Mark's question below. Okay, in this case, I will, since somebody else seconded it. I will get to these off topic questions. I'm up to Jay's question. Can I use the word girl in the conversation flirting? Up to here. I'm going to answer up to there, and then that's going to be it, because that'll take us way beyond time already. But I will start getting to these, and I'll start answering a few more off-topic ones as I go as well. What is the Facebook group? Somebody asked. If you want to get on the Facebook group, send an email to Garrett@valentinelife.com. And he'll hook you up with that. Just say, hey, I'm a women member. I want to be on the Facebook group. Okay, let's see. Been flaked on by girls after the number closed, doing the few minutes after the number for talking too much and making too specific of plans. At best, after number closing, keep plans vague. Does it come across as too much agenda? Okay, so no, it doesn't. The longer you stay, the better. The more specific the plans, the better. 100%. However, here's the problem. If in order to do that, you're being too try hard and you're becoming needy for her to stay there. Like if you've been this non-needy, cool person the whole time, and now in order to make that 5 minutes happen, in order to make the plan specific, you're looking really needy and really try hard, that's when it's a problem. So setting the plans was good. Looking try hard along the way was bad. And sometimes the looking try hard can be more of a factor than setting the plans the right way. Spending more time with her, almost always inherently good. Setting more specific plans, almost always inherently good. Although there's a limit to that, but generally that's inherently good. What the problem is if you're trying too hard to set the specific plans, it's needy. It's like, wait, you don't think we're going to hang out? Why do you feel this need to be so specific? Or if she wants to leave and you're trying too hard to keep her there, why do you feel the need to keep her there? Are you worried she's going to flake on you? So that the being worried that she's going to flake, if that's communicated, if that's conveyed, that's actually worse than whatever you're doing on a technical level. So that's where it kind of flip-flops. But all things being equal, spending longer and making better plans is good. But if it makes you needy in the process, it's bad. Todd has the best analogies to elaborate. Thanks, man. Let's see. Is it good to escalate or already escalating when I get aroused by looking in the girl's eyes? But at the same time, we talk about some stuff that's related to her job. I feel like she might also get aroused, but I go blank then. Since it's about escalation, I'll take that. Yeah, you can do a lot of like talking about like random things, but then it's just like there's different channels of communication, right? There's the verbal, the nonverbal, the physical, all those kind of things. So yeah, you could be having a mundane conversation, but just like eye contact is very sexual, or your tone of voice is very sexual. It's totally fine. There's even like there's a famous Jeffy Infield that he had in his original Hot Seat, where the girl's talking about quinine exposure from drinking like gin and tonic or whatever. He goes, "I'd like to give you some quinine exposure," right? Which is completely off topic and non-sexual in terms of the verbal, but like the tone of voice is like, "I want to fuck the shit out of you," right? So yeah, definitely there's a lot of there. You can escalate on non-verbal ways as well. It's a very valid thing. Let's see. The last two missions: qualifying, escalation, meet a we. Just tools used depending on the girl. Should they go in that sequential order during mission? Completely forgot about qualifying. They don't necessarily have to go in a particular order. They're both very useful tools. I would say that if the girl is qualifying to you, it's a very good indicator that you could go to we. But it's basically just different forms of escalation, because qualifying her is a form of escalation that also leads to more arousal. Going IU we is a form of escalation that leads to more arousal. Getting physical is a form of escalation that leads to more arousal. So these are all just different channels, and you can proceed down any of them at whatever pace. In certain interactions, there will be more of a need or more of a benefit to going down one channel versus the other. But yeah, in general, if you're moving down all the channels kind of in a way where like they're at pace with each other, then the interaction is going to feel very natural. If you've gotten very, very physically, like you're touching a lot physically, but you haven't escalated verbally in any way, shape, or form, it might feel a little weird, right? And samely, if you're talking about your life's ambitions, but you haven't touched her at all, it might feel a little weird. So ideally, they should kind of move kind of concurrently so that the overall interaction feels fine, but that's definitely not necessary. And also, it's completely possible to have an interaction while missing any one of these things, right? So it's not like every single one of them is necessary. They're all very, very useful tools, and they all kind of work together. Let's see. Okay, if you escalate verbally up to we and afterwards physically escalate with a high five, since a high five is the first move in physical escalation attack, would it move the interaction backwards? No, it wouldn't move the interaction backwards. It just wouldn't move the interaction forwards. I wouldn't be too worried about that. Yeah, in that particular case, I wouldn't be worried about it. There are probably times where something like that could occur, but I'm having trouble thinking of one off the top of my head. So if I can't think of one that's a common mistake, it's probably not a big thing to worry about overall. But the thing you're talking about is fine overall. It's fine. That is off topic, Mark. Thank you for the compliment, though. How do I focus on being more playful and emotional? Practice. Make yourself go out one night and just be silly. Make yourself go out one night, even if it feels stupid, even if you hate it. Make yourself go actually just be silly and stupid for a night and just try and practice it. Also, doing some things like comedy, improv comedy, singing, karaoke, anything that gets you outside your comfort zone and stretches you that way will actually be very, very useful to you as well. Interlace the fingers with the high five and way to make it more intimate. That's a good idea. Okay. Dance floor things off topic, so I'm going to skip it for now. Yes. How soon can I be touchy or go for a kiss in day game? It depends. I've had day game sets where I've been very physical. I've had most of my good day game sets where I haven't been. In general, I'll do a little bit of touch, like maybe up to like a hug at most, before doing a venue change, but mainly like I'll get physical once I've done an instant date. So for day game, it's more like open, escalate verbally, get the vibe right, instant date, and then get physical on the instant date. That's my usual plan. But there's nothing to say you can't do other things. It's just that's what usually works for me. Okay. I've tried following the physical escalation. I've tried to adapt it to how the escalation interaction felt, but whenever I went for the crossing fingers, it got weird responses. Went straight for the hug, they were much more receptive, though. Maybe a cultural environmental thing. It could be that. It could be that you're more natural with the hug as well. This is just logical, right? If there's a sequence of moves, they lead somewhere, and there's 1, 2, 3, and one works and 3 works, but 2 doesn't, just skip 2. Just drop it out of the sequence and have a shorter sequence, right? So with any of the physical moves, if you find something doesn't work for you, just drop it out. If you can get to the next step without it, who cares, right? Similar to a lot of guys, they're so wrapped up in the kiss. There are a lot of girls you can sleep with without kissing that actually it's harder to kiss them. So none of these moves is an absolute necessary thing. So maybe it's a cultural thing, maybe it's an environmental thing, maybe your technique in going for that move is weird. But regardless, if it's not working and the next one is, just skip it. Who cares? Let's see. Girl liked me, then hated me. Happened when I started my cocky funny, then moved to intimate disclosure, went back to cocky funny. She literally started saying she hated me. That'd be my guess. Yep, makes sense. Maybe you miscalibrated a little bit. Like you broke a little bit of trust and rapport. Makes sense. Yeah, see? So that's good. That's good diagnosis. Yeah, so essentially you were probably miscalibrated on the cocky funny and also in terms of the actual execution and then also in the timing. So yeah, you probably made a social error and it probably messed things up. Or maybe what it did is it made you seem too gamey, right? There's a good chance that you came off too gamey when you did that for Mike. How important is it to only escalate on a high note? It helps. It definitely helps. If you want your escalations to go well, escalating on low notes is a bad idea. It doesn't have to necessarily be on a high note, but you want it to be on a non-low note. So escalating on a non-high note isn't the biggest deal in the world. Escalating on a low note will be a big problem. So that's what I would really avoid is you just don't want to escalate and get rejection. Sorry, guys, I'm going to plug in my computer here just to make sure that I don't accidentally run out of batteries midway through here on you guys. Let me see if I can find my charger. Well, that would be fun if I don't have it. That would be really fun. Alrighty then. That's gross. Okay, well, I will try and speed through it. We should be fine anyway, but anyway. Okay, let's see. How important is it to only escalate on high notes? I got that one off topic. It's true. She doesn't respond to funny, then she definitely isn't going to respond to sexual. Not at all true. There are some girls that just don't it's generally true that if she doesn't respond to a small escalation, she won't respond to a bigger escalation. But there's also categories. So if she doesn't respond to funny, but she responds to a different small escalation, she might still well respond to a big escalation. Okay, so there's a correlation, but it's certainly not one-to-one. Just because she doesn't respond to one thing does not mean that she won't respond to another one. So don't think that every single escalation has to work. It's similar to the guy that said the hand clasp didn't work, but the hug did work for him. It'd be like saying, "Oh, she didn't clasp my hand. Will she not have sex with me?" No, she might. She might just have to hug you and go through a different escalation sequence. How to escalate verbally after having a platonic talk. Just do it. Just do it. Just do it. Just do it. Just decide that you're going to do it. Decide that this conversation has been platonic too long and I'm going to make it not platonic, right? It only takes one person to have a non-platonic interaction and that's you. She can reject your non-platonic interaction, but she can't make it platonic if you don't want it to be platonic, right? If you decide to make it sexual, it will be sexual, period. Is using sweetie game another way of using we escalation? Definitely there is we escalation in sweetie game. Like, what am I going to do with you? Stop making me love you, that kind of stuff. That's more like it's more like her in a sexual way. But yeah, you're implying a relationship. You can use we. Sweetie game is a great way to go ahead and implement that stuff. By the way, anybody who doesn't know what sweetie game is, it's an interesting thing to do. There's a video I have called How to Game Like a Sex Addict. The easiest way for a newbie to get laid. That's a great example of a thing I call sweetie game. It's an interesting form of game. It's really good for guys who are having trouble escalating. It won't help you get 9s and 10s very well, but it will help you if you're not getting laid at all and you're having trouble escalating to learn to escalate. Let's see here. Okay. I was trying to escalate on a girl. She kept getting distracted. How can I help her focus if I can't isolate? Don't try and escalate a lot. In those kind of situations, worry about the obstacles. If the dance floor and the friends are the issues, then you need to deal with them rather than dealing with the girl, right? If the biggest issue to you getting laid is the friends, not ignore the girl, but put less attention on her, more attention on the friends until you can make it work, right? There's what looks good and feels good, which is making the girl like you, and there's what actually works, which is getting the approval of the friends. So I'm always thinking, what's the limiting variable? What's the thing that's going to keep me from getting laid, keep me from getting a result? And that's the thing I focus on most. And so in this case, it would be the friends. Yes, escalate. Yeah, I mentioned this earlier. Escalation definitely not only can be, but is easier off of, not off of a neg, but off of, I would say, a disqualifier off of saying it in the negative, right? So it's a lot easier to say we wouldn't get along than we're going to fall in love with each other. We're going to fall in love with each other is like risky and serious. We're not going to get along is like teasing, playful. So yes, the more that you can introduce escalation in a teasing, playful way, the better off you're going to be. And if you want examples of that, check out the Infield. Check out the Infield in women because I do that constantly. Like I'm constantly escalating in the negative. Okay, final one here, Jay, that I said answer. Can I use the word girl in a conversation when flirting? Girls giggled when I use that word, even though they weren't attracted to me. Is it possible to use the word turn around or generate attraction? Okay, so what you're doing there is interesting. You're essentially using a gimmick, right? You're using that word as a gimmick. And if you find that a gimmick works, by all means use it. But you never want to be reliant on it. And also you want to be careful using gimmicks that you're getting real attraction and not just a laugh off of being silly, right? So like, for example, I'm like, oh, come on, girl, right? That kind of thing. Like a lot of girls will laugh at that because it's like funny to come out of my mouth. It's a little bit gay and it's a little bit like exaggerated. But like, is it actually getting them attracted to me? No. So it's good for buying attention. It's good for like snapping like them then to like giving yourself a little window to convey your personality. But you have to be careful not to be too much of a clown or not to be too silly and actually lose attraction overall because of it. Okay, so you have to be very, very careful about that. All right? All right, cool. I'm going to... I'll answer one more, which is if the battery dies during this question, deal with it. But I'll answer this one last question because it's pretty much here. Poor laptop logistics, it's funny. Why do you not recommend Sweetie Game for the highest levels of game? What do you recommend as an alternative for this level? The reason I don't like Sweetie Game at the highest levels is you're giving away too much of your power and you're a little too obvious. A lot of naturals, a lot of like guys who learn game without learning game, they essentially do Sweetie Game. And so girls that are 9s and 10s are very used to getting hit on in this way. And it's a little bit cheesy. It's also a little bit like unsophisticated and obvious. And so girls that get hit on a lot tend to have a lot of barriers up to it and have a lot of rejection. They'll be like, haha, that's funny. I appreciate it, but no thanks. Whereas with those kind of girls, you have to do something to get them to chase you and something to really snap them to attention and make you the higher value person in the reality. Whereas Sweetie Game doesn't really do that. Sweetie Game works in a situation where you're at an even value level or a higher value level to the girl already. And it's all about just the sexual dance and the escalation. It doesn't work in a situation where you have to establish value, which is why I don't recommend it for the 9s and 10s. Cool. I'll give a link to the Sweetie Game video, and then I'm going to sign off because I'm about to run out of battery and also because we have run out of questions. But it will be, let me find the link real fast. Hopefully I'll get it for you real fast here. YouTube. Quickly. Okay, here we go. All right, right here. Yeah, since we had a lot of Sweetie Game questions, this is the Sweetie Game link. Check out that video. It's a pretty interesting one. Yeah, how to game like a sex addict. All right, guys. Cool. I appreciate you guys coming out. And I will talk to you guys very, very soon. I'll get the relationship one up. It should have been up already, so I'll make sure that goes up. I'll make sure this goes up within about 24 hours if you guys want to rewatch it, etc. Also, check your inboxes because within the day today, we're going to get the schedule of when the webinars for next week are coming out. I want to see you guys on as many of those as possible. For any of you guys who had a lot of off-topic questions, sorry I couldn't answer all of them. Like, obviously, we ran out of time. But check them out. Answer those on the Facebook group. Yeah, Technique Toolbox will get up soon. We'll have that up within another couple weeks. But okay, so check the Facebook group, post your questions there, and we will be answering them over there as well. Also check up on the further webinars. And for those of you who have polling questions and leading questions, those kind of things, those are coming in the missions. Those are coming over the next few weeks. So I promise we'll get to those. All right. That said, it was good talking to you guys, and I will see you guys on the next one. Take care.